In a previous video, we learned that all accounting transactions have two sides, a benefit and a sacrifice. This concept is what allows the accounting equation to always remain in balance.
You can think of the accounting equation like an old-fashioned scale. Each side of the equation sits opposite the other and always stays perfectly balanced. But then we have a transaction that comes along and adds something to one side. Let's imagine that the business buys a truck. That would add a truck to the asset side of the transaction. Now the scale is unbalanced. In order to rebalance the transaction, we have two options. One option is to add something to the other side. Let's imagine that the business got a loan to pay for the truck. If we add the loan to the liability side of the scale for the same amount, that would balance the accounting equation again. The other option would be to take something away from the same side. Imagine that instead of a loan, the business decided to pay for the truck in cash. It added a truck to the asset side of the equation. But then it took away cash of an equal amount from that same side. Now the scale is in balance again. So every transaction in accounting always has two sides, and each one affects the accounting equation in a different way depending on the transaction. Either the transaction increases or decreases both sides of the accounting equation, like the example of the truck and the loan, or it increases and decreases the same side of the transaction, like the example of the truck paid in cash, making the same side go down and back up again. But no matter how it affects the accounting equation, the end result is always the same. Assets always equal liabilities and owner's equity when the transaction is complete.
So, in order to record an accounting transaction, you need to know what the two sides of the transaction are and what accounts are affected. But you also need to know if those accounts increase or decrease as a result of the transaction and how that keeps the accounting equation in balance.
Let's practice recording a transaction using what we've learned so far. Let's imagine that the company is paying rent for $1,500 in cash. What are the two sides of this transaction? We know that they are paying rent. That's a benefit. And we know that they are using cash to pay for it. That's a sacrifice. Now, which accounts are used for these two parts of the transaction? Rent expense, for one, and cash. Since we are paying cash, we know that cash is an asset and it's going down. So let's subtract $1,500 from cash. We also know that rent expense belongs in owner's equity, and expense always makes owner's equity go down. So let's subtract $1,500 from expense. So in this transaction, both sides of the accounting equation go down by the same amount, so the equation is still in balance. Let's try a different one. Let's imagine that instead of paying rent, the company was buying $1,500 in supplies in cash. The two sides of the transaction are buying supplies and paying cash. The accounts here would be supplies and cash. Now cash is still an asset, and it's still going down because we're spending it. Supplies is considered an asset as well. So when we buy more supplies, that would increase our supply amount, so the number is going to go up. Now in this example, it makes sense that cash goes down and supplies go up because they are both assets. They are both on the same side of the equation. By having the same side both increase and decrease, it ends at its original value and the equation is still in balance.
Double entry accounting can be tricky at first, but here are a few key things to remember. First, remember that all transactions have two sides. This means you are recording numbers in two places for each transaction. If you don't, the accounting equation won't balance. Second, the movement of these two parts of the transaction will either increase both sides of the accounting equation, or decrease both sides, or increase and decrease the same side. This way, the accounting equation will always stay in balance, just like a scale. There are a few questions that you can ask to help you along the way in analyzing an accounting transaction. Today, we learned 4 of them. First, what are two sides of the transaction? Next, what accounts are represented by these two sides? Then, do the accounts move up or down? And finally, does the accounting equation still balance when I'm done? As with any new skill, the concept of double entry accounting may be a bit confusing at first, and will take time and practice to master. The more you step through each question as you confront accounting transactions, the easier this analysis process will be, and the more confident you will feel. To learn more about double entry accounting and other accounting topics, check out more of my videos on YouTube or visit ToriNorman.com.